Chubb, secretary to the governor, was not a happy man. None of his training in planetary organisation had prepared him for this. Acting as an intermediary between the Governor-General of Chinga and an army of blood-crazed cultists, a number of whom were at this moment besieging the imperial residency. Warily, Chubb made his report to the governor.
They refuse to negotiate over the comm unit. They demand entry into the audience chamber, where they will dictate terms of surrender.
Completely engrossed with picking a bit of lint off his immaculate tunic, the governor didn't appear to hear him. Chubb cleared his throat loudly a few times.
Yes, no need to go on. I'm not deaf, you know.
The governor didn't seem to be taking the situation all that seriously. Chubb was confused. The guard commander had said that the residency would probably fall this afternoon, and that the only reinforcements due then were 5 Marines. What possible difference could 5 Marines make? He asked the governor for instructions.
Well, if they insist on coming in, you'd better let them in, hadn't you? Why must I do all the thinking around here?
Convinced that the governor was completely mad, Chubb fled. He reported the orders to the guard commander, who, without blinking, passed them on to the men at the front desks. Entirely bewildered, Chubb wandered back to his office, preparing to die as he had lived, behind his desk, surrounded by his beloved paperwork. But it was not to be. The governor summoned him to the audience hall to record the negotiations. Thus, he found himself in the last place in the world he wanted to be, standing next to a mad governor, watching the arrival of the cultists' leaders. There were 11 of them. 10 were dressed for war, heavily armed and wearing full battle armour, covered with strange symbols. The 11th was extremely large, and completely encased in a voluminous black robe. A horrible stench came from within the robe, and the thing's tongue whipped out from time to time, as if testing the air. It made Chubb sick to look at it. He suspected that if he ever saw what was beneath the robe, he too would go quite mad. One of the 10 warriors was the creature Chubb had talked to on the comm unit. Obviously the leader of the force, an incredibly ugly abhuman with the face of a pig, he strode forward until he was within a few feet of the governor. The governor regarded him with distaste.
I understand that you, sir, wish to discuss terms for surrender. Well, I'm afraid that is imperial policy, to demand unconditional surrender, particularly with those of your dubious social standing.
The cultists stiffened, an angry hiss coming from the monster in the robe, and Pigface fairly bristled with anger.
By the bloody teeth of Corn, do not dare to mock us. We have you by the throat, scum, and you know it. It is you who must surrender to us, or you will all die in a fashion more horrible than you could possibly imagine.
Chubb, who had a very vivid imagination, almost fainted. The governor tittered.
Oh dear, there seems to be some kind of misunderstanding. Quite amusing in its own way. You were thinking we were going to surrender. Us thinking you. My. Ah, well, these things happen. I guess that we have nothing further to talk about, then, do we? Chubb, please show these gentlemen the door.
Chubb goggled. This went beyond madness. This was suicide. The cultists' leader, who appeared to be as astonished as he was, suddenly barked an order, and the warriors pointed their weapons at the governor.
My dear sir, you don't think I would be so foolish as to agree to a meeting with you undefended, do you?
He waved a hand airily, and 24 guardsmen appeared at the balcony surrounding the chamber. Pigface stared at them for a moment, then laughed. He barked another order, and the creature within the robe hissed a reply. Slowly, almost theatrically, 2 huge twisted parodies of hands emerged from the gigantic sleeves of the robe and untied the belt. Everyone in the hall was frozen. Even the cultists appeared to be terrified. At last the belt was undone, and the creature slowly shrugged off the robe. The beast was even more horrible than Chubb had imagined. Covered with bright, almost fluorescent red fur, wearing black and red armor, a huge whip and axe at its belt. It had a face like a horned dog, from its back hung 2 bat-like wings. It stood there for a moment, looking around slowly, and smiled. An infinitely dangerous smile. A smile anticipating bloodshed. With shouts of terror and dismay, the Imperial Guardsmen dropped their weapons and fled. Chubb's legs gave way completely, and he crumpled to the floor. To his credit, though pale and shaking, the governor stayed where he was. Through a haze of fear, Chubb heard him murmur, "A bloodthirster. We are honored." The thirster looked at him and licked his lips. He said in a voice like gravel dropped onto an empty coffin, and moved towards the governor, plucking whip and axe from his belt. The axe moaned as it was freed. "Perhaps you had better discuss that with those gentlemen first, sir." There was no mockery in the governor's voice. Chubb couldn't imagine anyone daring to mock this creature. The governor nodded at the far side of the hall. It was completely empty. Then suddenly there was a shimmer of light, a soundless rush of air, and 5 men stood there. The Marines. Chubb guessed that they were the reinforcements who arrived this afternoon, wore Terminator armor, grey in colour and covered with intricate embossing. They carried strange weapons, long halberds with glowing axe heads upon them. They faced the bloodthirster without fear. The demon snarled a cry of recognition, and Chubb would almost swear, happiness.
"Worthy mate!"
It bellowed, raising an axe and whip, rushing towards the men in armor. They met its charge unflinchingly, black demon weapon and glowing halberd screaming through the air in a dance of power and fury. One of the Marines pointed back at the demon and roared strange words, and the demon reeled back, clutching its head and screaming in pain. But the bloodthirster was strong. Recovering before the Marines could press their advantage, it counterattacked savagely. With astonishing quickness, the demon disengaged from the Marines it was facing, and hurled itself at the Marine who had hurt it. Appearing to be somewhat dazed by the ferocity of his own attack, the Marine had stumbled off to one side, away from the protection of his fellows. Lashing out with its whip and entangling the Marine's weapon, the demon slammed its axe down onto the Marine's head. The axe sheared through the Terminator armor as if it were butter, cleaving the Marine from neck to breastplate. Clutching uselessly at the weapon buried in his chest, the Marine crumpled to the ground. While the demon was wrenching its weapon from the body of the dead Marine, another Marine slipped around behind it and slashed a line of white fire across its undefended back. Black ichor dripped, smoking, onto the floor, and the demon's screams shook the building to its foundation. Pigface and the other warriors had been paralyzed with surprise by the Marine's arrival, but the sight of the demon's wound brought them out of their shock and into a frenzy of anger and bloodlust. With bellows of rage, they rushed to support the demon, and 2 Marines cut them down with almost contemptuous ease. This fight was between the demon and the Marines. "I think we'd better take our leave." The governor helped Chubb to his feet, bolts of energy blasting the air around them, and the 2 stumbled through the door. As shamefaced Imperial Guards hustled the men away, Chubb babbled a question to the governor. "Space Marines. Grey Knights, to be precise. They were our reinforcements." But who are the Grey Knights?" Chubb could barely speak, even now. "Who are they? They fight creatures like the one in there. Beyond that, my dear boy, I think you would be better off not knowing anything. In fact," the governor looked at Chubb strangely, "I am very much afraid that you know too much already. Knowledge can be very dangerous." But Chubb wasn't listening. "Why the parley? Why didn't the Marines use their teleports to hit that thing before it got inside?" The governor sighed. "It was too much of a risk. There were only 5 knights, and one unfortunate accident could have killed them all, so we had to find a way to bring the demon to the place where the knights could fight it. This was the obvious solution." An explosion rocked the building. Dust and mortar filled the hallway. The governor looked disgusted. "Tss,
Look at this tunic. It's filthy. Would you be so kind to get me another one for my dressing room, Chubb?
Grateful at last to have orders that he fully understood, Chubb willingly complied. Behind him, the governor shook his head sadly. The boy had been a useful foil, excellent at making the enemy think them all foolish, weak, and stupid. It was unfortunate that he had witnessed the scene in the reception hall, an unforgivable mistake on the governor's part. Chubb wasn't to blame, but that changed things not one iota. He had told Chubb the truth. Knowledge is dangerous, and Chubb simply knew too much.